Light, we good on light? Four. Want a little more light? We need a little more light on stage. How's that? Better?
That's good.
One, two, 3, 4.
thank you very much. Oh, what a nice crowd. All right, we still got some juice. There we go. All right, there we go. All right. So, always, should I maybe come out with 9? Are we good, Aaron? I think we're good. All right. So, thank you for being here. Thank you for being here. We appreciate your coming. We hope that you enjoy this concert as much as we will. That first tune, Back to the Basement, was written by a guy that I had the good fortune of going to school with for a very brief time at the University of North Texas. Brett Zvacek is a brilliant trombone player and also a great arranger, as you just heard. And that was a wonderful original featuring Bob Devine on trombone, Saunders Jones on alto sax, Buddy Gifford on trumpet, Dick Brand on the tenor saxophone, Mark Tucker on piano, and some other little guy on trumpet. Okay, our next tune. Now, I hope you young people out there have heard of the Beatles, right? Okay, thank you. Okay, well, one of the iconic groups of all time, and they were always kind of ahead of the game in terms of certain statements they were making in their music. And Paul McCartney actually wrote this song, I think it was in the early 1960s, as a response to the racial strife that was going on in the country at the time. And I didn't know this until recently that Blackbird was actually a reference to a young African-American woman, and the idea of this song was to give hope to people of color. And so I think this is a wonderful tune. I'm going to have Jim play just a couple of bars. Sound familiar? That's great. So this arrangement that we're about to do takes that idea and really runs with it. And you'll hear a few changes throughout, and it's really a neat arrangement. So this is going to feature Buddy Dithert on flugelhorn and trumpet, Blackbird. 1, 2, 3, 4. Buddy Dithert on flugelhorn coat.
Yeah, buddy.
Okay, our next tune is from the hard bop era. Bobby Timmons, who was a great piano player, who played with all the great bands in that era, most notably the Jazz Messengers, Art Blakey and the Jazz Messengers. And he was a great composer. And this tune was written in 1960 for his first album as a band leader. And later that same year, Oscar Brown Jr. wrote lyrics to this. And it's supposed to represent him taking his young boy to the zoo. And every time his son would see something, he'd go, "Hey, Daddy, what that there?" And so that's kind of how this works. So it's a really wonderful tune. And as you will hear, those of you who are, I think there are probably some of my students in the audience there. Yeah, oh, good, too. All right. So you'll notice this is in a minor key, like we said, some of these hard bop tunes are. You'll hear a lot of blue notes and really wonderful arrangement. So here you go.
1, 2, 1, 2, 3.
Lester Pleasant on the tenor saxophone. Yeah. Buddy Dithard again on trumpet. Yeah, great solo. Now our next number, it took me a while to figure this out. I don't know why. It took me a while to figure out the fact that this must be a reference to our Twitter fanaticism in this country. And so this is a very clever tune. It's kind of a rock and roll tune. I know it's a jazz concert, but you'll get over it. Thank you, sir. Our stage manager for this evening. Thank you, Ron.
That's the drop the mic.
Well, I'm just kidding, Aaron. He's like, oh, okay.
Use two of them like Elvis.
If only. Okay, so I figured out that this must be a reference to our insanity with our, this. Of course, I don't use Twitter because I can write complete sentences. So I'm just kidding. I do text all the time, but complete sentences. All right, so here is Tweet Fatigue by Gordon Goodman.
Yeah, I would say that too.
Are you ready? One, two, three. like, it's a cartoon, why are they doing that? Because it's fun. That's why. And we do fun stuff up here. Well, just today, I was fumbling around online and saw 2 articles that referenced the Jetsons. I was blown away. One is about, there was a German gentleman, I think in Oklahoma, near Tulsa, who built a house. He was a welder. He built a house in his spare time. It looks just like one of the houses you would have seen on the Jetsons. And it's like a circular thing, and it's like windows all the way around. It's the coolest thing. And then there was, I forget the other one, but you get the idea. So, hope you have fun. Here's the Jetsons theme song.
1, 2, 3, 4.
That's fun, isn't it? Yeah, it's crazy fun. All right, as you can tell, these guys are pretty good. For a bunch of, well, chronologically challenged people. I'm very fortunate to work with so many wonderful musicians who come from all over the Atlanta area, and some actually come from way farther. I've got at least 4 people who come all the way from Cartersville, Georgia, to play in this band. That's how much they like this, and I feel very lucky that people are driving that far to play in this band. One of those people has been in this band a long time and has been one of the strongest supporters of this band, and I'm really happy to feature him on this next number. This is a beautiful ballad by the great Sammy Nestico, who is best known for his work with the Count Basie Band, but led his own group for many years. Sadly, he died a little over a year ago. And brilliant composer and arranger, who's well known for writing music for younger bands. This is not one of those pieces. This is an adult piece. And it's going to feature our lead alto saxophonist, Dr. Saunders Jones, Samantha. alto saxophone. Okay, this next tune is kind of fun. For those of you taking notes, I would suggest this is a modal number. You remember that? We just studied that. This is written by Jeff Holmes, who I had the good fortune of meeting, and I heard his college jazz band. He is the director of jazz studies at the University of Massachusetts in Amherst, Massachusetts. And I got to go there for a trumpet conference. God, it was 15 years ago, hard to believe. And I heard his band. And he was not only a great trumpet player, but he was a great piano player and composer. And this is one of his tunes, Sammy the Chinchilla. And I thought I would just go ahead and mention, those of you taking notes, this is the flugelhorn. It's the big fat one. And it changes the sound. It makes it really mellow and pretty. And I'm going to try to play it on this. All right. You good? 1, 2, 1, 2, 3. I only had 8 measures of rest in that whole thing, so that was Jim on the guitar. Okay, a couple more, then we'll let you go home. Of course, we just got through talking about Duke Ellington, one of the icons of jazz music, and especially large ensemble jazz music. He collaborated with a really famous, wonderful trumpet player from the swing era named Harry James. And together they wrote this next tune called I'm Beginning to See the Light. It was written in 1944. And Harry James had a hit. I forget who the vocalist was, but hundreds of bands have recorded it. And this is a wonderful arrangement by Sammy Nestico, who wrote Samantha that you heard a few minutes ago, the solo ballad. So here we have I'm Beginning to See the Light.
One, two, 3, 4.
Oh, thank you so much. Well, that brings us to our last number. And before we do that, I'm just going to introduce the guys in the band. I'm not going to give you their whole bios. You can go to our website and see a lot of that. We'll start over here with the rhythm section. Mr. Mark Tucker on piano. And we have Jim, I can never remember.
Big Jim Bedrick.
Bedrick, yeah. I keep thinking Bedrock, but it's Bedrick. But he is a bedrock. So Jim Bedrick on the guitar. And literally playing double bass tonight. You notice he's playing electric bass and upright bass. He keeps switching because the Latin rock stuff really needs the punch of the electric. And this is one of the best in town on both. Steve Blair back there on the bass. And an old friend of mine, we played in a rock band together in the mid-1980s, believe it or not. And here we are again, this many years later. Terry Creedon on the drums. All right, now the saxophone section. You know, I told these guys that we could relax the uniform tonight, but I think some of these guys went a little too far, maybe, I don't know. Most of the guys in the sax section did a pretty good job. All right. Lead tenor saxophone, Mr. Dick Prang. And this is the first time that Jeff has played with us. Our regular second alto player had a mishap and had to lay out for a while, and we're very sorry that he couldn't be here, but we're very happy to have Jeff Smith filling in on second alto saxophone. Yeah, have a hand for Jeff. And again, all the way from Cartersville, Georgia, a retired physician and instructor at Kennesaw State, Dr. Saunders Jones here on lead alto sax. And a retired music teacher, and you were in Fulton, right? Fulton County Schools. And I think he and Dick are racing to see who has the most chronologically disadvantaged title. But that's Lester Pleasant on tenor sax. And you just heard him play that wonderful funky solo on the baritone sax, Mr. Doug Brown over here. All right, now the trombone section. On your far left, Dr. Skip Dolt, who happens to be a very fine dentist. Actually, Jeff's a dentist also. And I'm not sure what you do, but Bob Devine has been in this band longer than anybody. He was in the very first version of this band in 1975. And Bob and I went to different high schools together, and we've known each other for that long. So my good buddy Bob Devine on lead trombone. And one of our newer members, someone else who drives all the way from Cartersville, Nathaniel Addix on trombone. And I finally found somebody who doesn't live that far away to play in the band. Wonderful bass trombone player, Mr. Clarence White. And now the trumpet section on your far left, Keith White, no relation to Clarence. And joining us for the first time in the band, a wonderful trumpet player. You were up in Atlantic City, right? Played on some of the... Yeah, he was a professional lead trumpet player in Atlantic City and a lot of the casinos for a long time, and we're happy he's down south now. Also from Cartersville, John Houghton on the trumpet, lead trumpet. And next to John, somebody else from Cartersville. And you heard him play some wonderful solos tonight, man. Just beautiful playing. Mr. Buddy Dithert on trumpet. And another longtime friend of mine I met when I was a freshman at Georgia State. He went to Emory University, and he played in their orchestra, and they needed some trumpet players from Georgia State. So me and one other trumpet player, we went over there and sat in with him, and I've known Mark ever since. Mark Merlin, who's also a doctor back there. Now, once again, we're going to end this jazz concert with some rock and roll. This is reminiscent of there was a very famous jazz trumpet player, played lead trumpet with Woody Herman and many other bands, named Bill Chase. And he had this incredible band when I was a kid in the late 1960s, early 1970s, and it was simply Chase. And it featured 4 trumpets and a rock and roll rhythm section, all kinds of drums, guitars, basses, keyboards, and a lead singer. And they did a bunch of really wonderful tunes. Some of you may be familiar with Get It On and things like that. This is kind of reminiscent of that, and this is written by Mark Taylor, who's a great arranger who worked in the United States Army Band for many years. And so we're going to end with Brass Machine. Thank you again for coming. We hope we see you again soon. Yeah, it's okay to clap. Thank you. Thank you to Aaron Gottlieb, our sound man, to James Hennessy, who runs this whole building, and to Norman Richards again, who has been our house manager. Thank you so much for coming. We hope to see you again. If you would like to come say hello to the guys, they don't bite hard. Anymore, right. None of them have teeth. All right, we got 2 dentists up here and no teeth. All right, thank you so much. Come say hello if you'd like. Great job, guys. That was really fun.
Worked out a lot better than yesterday.
Yeah, I bet. Yeah, it is. You have a bad rehearsal and a good concert. That's what it's too cold yesterday.
And I have my little white pack back there to put
Yes. Your little white pack. You got anything you want to save out of this?
I think I know myself out here.
Oh, man, it's Earl. Cool.
Yeah.
Hey, Perry, how are you? Doing great.
What's up, fellas? Good to see you. Skip.
Hey, Earl. Man, good to see you, man. Thank you so much for coming. What's that? You know what? My wife would kill me if I don't. There's only one skip goal in the state of Georgia. Steal the program, Google me. I'm not really fun. There's one of me in the state. I need to talk to you.
I'm trying to get him there. He said the grandkids want out today.
How have you been doing? Doing all right? You still playing? Likewise. You guys sound good. We have our
Ray gave you this.
Oh, really?
This is the gift from Ray.
I like it.
Oh, it's so cool to meet you people.
That's cool.
Hey, thank you, Tony.
Well,
Thank you so
yeah,
much.
man, call me and we'll chat. Okay, chat.
Thank you so much
Hey,
for
Bob.
coming.
Good to see you. Good. How are you?
You Susie.
Hey, Sandra.
Wow,
Hey, man,
so
how you doing?
cool to
What's
meet
up?
you.
What's up? I don't know. Nothing here. Hey, Crip.
Thank you so much. So cool to see you again. Desert Machine. Hey, Mark. How you doing? What did you do?
See that exercise?
Oh, okay, yeah. Thank you so much for coming. Oh, we rock there, yes. How are you?
So when you get out of that thing, do more race.
Yeah. We're actually going to be a student.
Good therapy for you.
Yeah, if you don't like to do it. But you see that off, you got to do that. But we're working out.
We missed you. We have one rehearsal and then you vanished.